ISEKAI BAD.
I'd say we're all sick of seeing the same shit regurgitated with a fresh coat of paint every season several times over, but clearly we, as a collective, are not. Indeed, there's something to be said both about how you, as a viewer, need no introduction to the concept that isekai anime are so derivative of one another that one may genuinely struggle to tell them apart even when trying to, but also about how over a decade into this unending hell cycle the anime industry has nosedived into, I'm still confident that now is just as good a time as any to craft an entire video series surrounding the idea. As you and I both know, this is not even close to the first season of anime harboring the isekai illness, and it almost certainly isn't close to the last. But fret no longer if you actually so happen to be disappointed by this trend, because Tsukimichi is here to change all of that. Get ready to be subverted. Tsukimichi isn't your average ordinary isekai. This isn't your everyday run-of-the-mill isekai, okay? Tsukimichi does things a little bit differently around here, alright? It might take some getting used to at first, but we're kind of quirky over here around this part of town. Okay, legitimately forgot the main character's name, Makoto. Makoto is an isekai hero, but according to his ululating preamble, his life in another world isn't typical. No, you see, a typical isekai hero might go to a Tolkien-esque fantasy world where he is meant to be the hero, but instead Makoto is flung into the far reaches of a Tolkien-esque fantasy world because the local goddess doesn't care much for his face. Here, he is unlikely to be the hero to anyone, well, unless of course you count those lowly orcs and whoever else, he is definitely not the hero to ever. An isekai hero would typically be well endowed with superpowers, allowing him to traverse this new land in style and cause all adversity before him to crumble. Unfortunately for Makoto, he is only blessed with the power to speak the language of any being, have extraordinary access to magic, and act with superhuman physical prowess due to his originating on Earth. With such shit abilities, it's no wonder he is only immediately able to enslave a dragon that the entire population of orcs has feared for generations. Finally, a typical isekai hero, one that would very obviously not resemble Makoto physically in the slightest, would have a harem of no less than 30 boing boing women hanging onto his every action and word, soaking their garments every step of the way. Poor old Makoto doesn't even get stuck with normal women. Instead, he's forced to spend his days with that very same dragon he enslaved, who turns out, in a twist nobody could imagine, to be a hideously attractive and extremely powerful woman capable of creating a pocket dimension to build Makoto's perfect world herself, hanging on his every word. He's also unfortunate enough to have a submissive, traditionally dressed servant girl dedicating her life to him within 10 minutes of meeting, she, being a spider monster, once considered equivalent in power to a force of nature as well. How will he ever survive being surrounded by such horrible company? Like Mushoku Tensei, Tsukimichi originates from a 2012 publication that now seems ancient in the anime world, giving it the illusion of being a shallow replication of something you've probably already seen done better. No, unfortunately, Tsukimichi is one of the many miserable contributing cogs that spun to propel us where we are today. Another emboldening to the isekai cycle where its rebounding popularity is sure to inspire yet another wave of aspiring isekai artists to do it all some more. If Tsukimichi has one thing going for it, it would be that it introduces one story element I'm not sure I've heard prior, and that would be that his parents are actually from the isekai world originally. It's not talked about much, but in the event that Makoto persists in following in his folks' footsteps, it's possible the narrative could develop into some kind of interesting mystery about their past lives and Makoto's true purpose in bringing his bloodline back home. If I were a gambling man, however, I would guess the larger focus would be on a bunch of stupid bullshit instead. Do you want to hear a really sick joke? The Dungeon of the Black Company is a story of one Kinji Ninomiya, who has dreamt his entire life of producing enough passive income that he may spend the remainder of his days lounging in luxury. Not seconds after Kinji is celebrating the definitive accomplishing of said goal, he is unceremoniously dropped into a modernized Tolkien-esque otherworld where he must work his way back up from nothing again, his fortune surely among the lowest in history. He gets a job at a crystal mine, where he schemes of ways to dupe the system into throwing more moolah his way while toiling away among the commoners. His first plan involves recruiting his limp-wristed co-worker to help him sneak high-value resources back to the boss by exploiting a secret path he stumbles upon. In their hidden gold mine, the pair are confronted by a dragon who, at the risk of getting eaten, Kinji reasons with by offering better food in exchange for protection from other monsters. In a huge twist, Rim then changes form from evil dragon to kawaii loli and helps them. Ultimately, Kinji's plan falls apart when his greed pushes his co-workers too far and they discover his brainwashing escapades for personal gain, followed by a group ass-kicking session and overall distaste among the staff for the guy. What's the punchline of that joke I mentioned, you ask? Dungeon of the Black Company is straight up the same fucking overall premise of Tsukimichi if you've been paying attention, hitting just about every concept in the way Tsukimichi claims to want to, with a sense of actual satire rather than an insubstantial stated one. Let's see, you got shitty luck when it comes to where you get isekai'd and when, a similar fantasy world with an actual modernized twist, a smart, cunning main character trapped without power and acting plans that explode wonderfully in his own face, and, most remarkably, a big scary dragon that turns out to be a cute anime girl and hangs out with the protagonist, only instead of being his subordinate, Rim seems liable to go back to wanting to eat Kinji on a dime, and instead of being graceful and mature, bears inhuman limbs even at her most human, shits on the floor, and pisses in a shared bath. Can you guess which of the two shows is more popular? In a bubble, I would have gotten the question wrong. You know, sometimes I really wish they'd just stay dead. I really don't know what's happening in this show. I don't really want to talk about it for too long, and to be honest with you, it's so forgettable after the first episode that when I was writing the script for this video, I actually thought the beginning scene I just showed you was from Tsukimichi until I went back and realized it's another show entirely. Seirei Gensouki is about this guy who was really trying to play the whole isekai by a truck thing safe by being in a large vehicle. Oh, what, you thought that would work, asshole? Just when you think you're in the clear, BAM! Train hits the bus, you're out of here, go be a superhero, you fucking Nimrod. Anyway, he enters the body of a homeless kid in a magic world who, is entirely the same kid that was already there, except now sometimes he remembers he's also the guy from the normal world. Some stuff happens that isn't very important, and he ends up saving a princess basically on accident after the isekai goddess tells him how to use magic. Then this band of worried princesses invite him to the capital because of his good deed, but he is taken captive by the insubordinate military guy here and beaten for hours because he's pretty sure the main character helped kidnap the princess in the first place. After, the princess he saved frees him from torture and helps him look civilized for the ceremony she wants to hold to thank him. I don't know, there's a lot of characters with names I don't remember, and I really don't know or care where any of the plot points are going because it's pretty boring. When the show isn't biding its time with generic shit, it's confusing me with characters who take actions that basically make no sense or plot elements that might make a little sense if anyone ever watches it to the end, but I can't really imagine why you'd want to. Something else I can't really imagine you wanting to do, but apparently there are many who do, is watch how a realist hero rebuilt the kingdom. In this super fun and creative isekai show, Kazuya is summoned to a Tolkien-esque world where he is meant to serve as a bargaining chip between warring kingdoms. The king of Elfrieden, being a namby-pamby quivering the pants sweater, hands over leadership of the entire country to Kazuya upon the first sign of confrontation, and for good measure, offers his daughter up, like the object she is, as his fiancée. Kazuya proceeds to use his superior intellect to big brain all of the nation's problems, such as complex matters involving starvation and national security, by rambling episode after episode, explaining to us cattle and the many beautiful women throwing themselves at him about his vast knowledge of high school economics 101. In episode 2, they stand in several different exciting locations, such as a field of cotton, a hallway, and an office, discussing how supply and demand works. Then Kazuya gains the ability to imbue his consciousness into inanimate objects, which he uses to make pens do extra paperwork for him. Then he does a casting call to the people of the kingdom, asking for anybody that knows how to do anything to approach him for a talent show because the people in his cabinet didn't go to school like he did. I already said it, but this show is literally about a guy standing in several different spots with somebody for 20 minutes discussing extremely basic economic concepts like it's impressive, and then it saves the kingdom someday. Shit, if all I gotta do is be the ruler and get some bitches horny to say, yeah, we got too much cotton, we need food because we're all starving otherwise, then sign me the fuck up. It's like the plot of Idiocracy where the people are so stupid they don't realize you need to sprinkle crops with water instead of Gatorade. Am I supposed to think it's unique that it's an isekai that doesn't focus on fighting with swords and magic? It does the opposite of make this show better. It's extraordinarily boring. And what does cutting out the action of a typical isekai leave us with here? Talking about nothing through the runtime, and beyond that it hits every trope imaginable. Plain main character boy is given immense power immediately along with a magic that allows him to do exactly what he needs here, and a harem of women, no less less than 5 actually. Speaking of women, the only thing I like about this show really is the previous queen, more specifically her mommy voice. This show would be at least a 3 out of 5 if it spent a lot more time on her moaning into a microphone. If you want a good show that discusses medieval economics, just go watch Spice and Wolf. Moving on to something a little more mediocre, Battle Game in 5 Seconds is about pro gamer and galaxy-brained apath Akira Shiryanagi, who, bored with beating everybody and everything, is abducted by a secretive organization who demands he, and many others, fight each other using their pre-selected singular magic power as product test subjects for said powers. It's like Danganronpa or Saw with a cat girl doing all the talking, who I'm only mentioning because she's an edgy cat girl voiced by Mayumi Shintani. Officiating her is the only thing I like about the show, cringy or not. Also, it's not very well animated. Most of the characters look pretty dumb or unoriginal. The concept is, like I said, something you've probably mostly seen before. I wouldn't say it's straight up shit. It might even be a little entertaining to see what everyone's powers will be and how some of the fights play out, but I wouldn't think of it as anything philosophical. The main character gets the ability to use whatever power he can convince his opponent he has, which, because he's the smartest man in the universe, will probably mean he can do anything, overriding the possibility of any true adversity to overcome, but you know. Oh, and I know it's not exactly an isekai anime. It seems like it probably takes place at an unknown facility on Earth, but I'm including it anyway because it's close enough and I don't want to talk about it in its own video. Something I would rather sort of talk about is Drugstore in Another World, the season's most shafted isekai. It's about Reiji Kiryu, whose isekai superpower is the ability to make good potions that other people are too stupid to. He opens a pharmacy and sells his wares to the lowly townsfolk, each episode throwing in some random gags about his creations while having an overall focus on an individual problem to solve every installment. Like this guy's relationship struggles with his lady friend in dire need of crazy pills. Reiji's shop is also home to some other characters like Mina, the unhelpful ghost, and Noello, the werewolf who must have been bitten by a human first because her tiny brain is definitely more akin to an animal's. It's a cozy, inoffensive, mildly funny slice of life, barely disguised as an isekai. A positive trait in my mind, considering the narrative in the anime adaptation anyway doesn't even bother to show us how he got isekai'd. Spoiler, who gives a fuck? So why do people not seem to like it? I have a few ideas, most of which end with everybody being a troglodyte. The simplest explanation is that morons who like shitty isekai watched it because it's labeled as one and then peed themselves when they found out the main character isn't a rapist and the story isn't an action-packed adventure to nowhere and is instead a deliberately slow-paced cutesy comedy about a non-provocative main character-kun and his lolly friends. I don't have to spell out for you any more than this that I like slice of life shows and I think the dumb dog girl is charming, but what can I say? It's a matter of taste and mine is just superior to most. In fact, I personally found the show to have some surprising hints of consistent world building early on as the setting takes the shape of their small hometown where many of the characters' backgrounds are vaguely connected, and I appreciate it. If you want a chill show about at-home medicine and cute, mild characters, I can't see any reason to hate on this one. It's not very high budget in the looks department, but I wouldn't call it intolerable by any stretch. I think everything appears perfectly serviceable. Perhaps you're in the market for an anime that's a little more than visually serviceable. How about looks pretty damn cool instead? Hold that thought, I know what you're thinking. This isn't exactly an isekai anime either, but just keep holding that thought and I'll probably address it, maybe no I won't. D-Side Traumerei is a CG animated series tying into a mobile game release centering on a few different high schoolers who are enlisted as soldiers called knocker-ups, epic, for an intersecting dimension at war with monsters derived from the negative emotions and experiences of city folk. The first thing I noticed about this show is how utterly shockingly good it looks. I mean, at this point, who looks at the CG animation tag of an upcoming show and gets excited? Yet here we are with D-Side, where the characters not only look like cool-ass over-the-top Persona protagonists in all of their fits, but the fighting is engaging, fluid, and just generally impressive to look at most of the time, particularly when compared to the rest of the low-effort CG animation in anime. Just look at these colors, look at the lighting in this scene. I mean, they really wanted the show to avoid looking like a dumpster fire, a goal well accomplished here. For this alone, I'd say the show's worth looking at for yourself to see if you're into it, but D-Side is another show this season I've noticed being panned by others, the main concern for most being the writing. Well, that and the fact that Knocker-Ups obviously doesn't sound as badass in English as the production team probably thought, although unless they have somebody who speaks English on said team, I don't really care to fault them for it. In fact, no, I think it's badass. You'd be a gigachat if people went around calling you Mr. Knocker-Up, don't lie. Anyway, the writing's a little clunky, but I'm gonna be honest, not nearly as bad as people make it made out to be. See, outside of the whole go over to the Digimon world and fight monsters with not magical girl weapons, there's the bit about negative emotions turning people into monsters. The show does take more time than it probably needs cementing this idea by introducing you to the many traumatic backstories surrounding the characters, attempting to humanize them no doubt, and I don't think it totally fails at it. Now, these are serious social issues like domestic abuse, and obviously you have the right to think it's stupid to present these ideas too quickly or use them to drive a narrative about fighting monsters, but like, if you do that, I'd hope you'd say the same thing about Wonder Egg Priority, an anime that, up until the unfortunately rushed end of the show, was pretty universally looked at as high quality for doing basically the same shit with about the same level of tact and inherent depth, for better or worse. Like, the abusive dad in episode 2 is always sitting at home reading the newspaper, waiting for his wife or daughter to try anything so he can immediately stand up like, did I say you could fucking speak? And it's honestly pretty comical because it's not that good at being serious, but at the same time I do feel genuinely upset or empathetic for the daughter character here because outside of some janky pacing or imagery in these slower but more serious parts, it's still some visceral stuff. Just like in Wonder Egg, it's unsubtle and funny that the monster here has a big penis for a face, but I still feel emotion for the victims being represented here at the hands of sexual abuse. I don't know, I get it if you can't find any personal meaning or message here, but I don't think either lack those qualities either just for being clumsy at times. Anyway, don't let anybody simply tell you the show's shit and write it off. I'd say look for yourself. Wait a minute, this video is called Isekai Bad, so why am I spending all this time defending anime? I'm supposed to be saying everything is a steaming pile of dog shit. This video is falling apart right off the bat. Must be an off season. Watch, everything will be terrible next time I know it. Sonny Boy is my friend's cat. It's also, by a wide margin, the most fascinating isekai to come out of this season and any season in recent memory. Not only is it stylistically striking, it takes some very tropey isekai basics and transforms them into a literary thematic journey born of the same abstractions you'd find in Lord of the Flies. No, being an isekai hero in Sonny Boy is not a game. Rather, it's a glance into human nature, on what being lost on an island does to a closed ecosystem of previously societally connected people, in this case, a Japanese class of high schoolers. Our story sets itself in motion instantly in a seemingly empty, dread-inducing void. An entire group of students finds themselves adjusting to being alone in nothing, just each other and the building they teleported in on. In doing so, they discover this new dimension has granted them, almost at random, some wild and visually captivating superpowers, but not everyone present is so fortunate. They guess only about half of them have a power, while the other half are left behind, a new hierarchy set between those with inhuman abilities and those without. The show doesn't piddle about with the possible repercussions either here. Within a day of the more authoritarian bunch declaring what is to be done for the greater good, conflict takes the shape of a looming fear that youthful insouciance might boil over into unchecked violent backlash. At times when cooperation becomes more favorable among the majority, they arrive at even more confusing conclusions. The eternal vacuum is not their only destination on this tour of the surreal. They literally go to an island, but still not one of their previous Earth. And here they begin to root out and catalog a slew of other parallel worlds, as well as a list of physical laws they discover these worlds abide by, such as that for an exchange of goods to be successful, there must be an equally agreed upon trade, lest your stolen or gifted items go up in supernatural flames of judgment. And how completely refreshing it is that Sonny Boy offers not only something purposeful in concept, although what that is exactly is not clear from the outset, but delivers to us a setting of true untapped potential. This actually feels like another world, a place not entirely unlike our own in some respects, but alien in how travel occurs, uncanny in atmosphere, and perplexing in constitution. If you want to candidly observe someone like you explore a strange world, especially if you are exhausted with anime's alternatives, Sonny Boy is the vacation destination you've been seeking.